Now, the following circuit, this is a FE style question, and I want you to realize that this is a FE style question. Now, here what's happened here, in this particular circuit, you have these two independent sources are used to energize a resistive circuit, right? So, this has a 12 volt source here. It has R1 being a 1 ohm resistor, and R2 a 2 ohm resistor, R3 a 3 ohm resistor. It has a current source on this side of the circuit, which is a 2 amp source. Now what's going to happen here is that they wanted to find the current through resistor R2. That's the current through this resistor R2. And they gave you, in the FE exam, obviously they're going to give you a choice between, here you have 4 choices to choose one. One of this is the right answer. 1 amp, A, 1.5 amp, B, C, 2 amp, or D, 10 amp. So we're going to proceed to determine what this R2, this current through this R2 is. Right? How do we proceed with this? Let's take this as a loop and just use these 2 loop resistors here. So if you realize here, if you're taking loops for this circuit, you realize this is loop 1, which contains I2. This is loop 2, which contains I1, right? But you realize this is clockwise and this is opposite to the flow of current. So most of the current in I prime here is going to be negative, right? So this I prime 2 current we're working with is actually negative 2 amps, since it's opposing the flow of the actual current source. The actual current source is actually 2 amps in this direction, but we're taking clockwise flows, right? We're taking clockwise flows. So in that case, this I1 prime is actually minus 2 amps. And then I2 here is obviously flowing out of this 12 volt source, going around through I2 around this circuit, and that is the same current that's they're looking for, which is the current passing through I2. Now, let's work this load, each load, right? Each of these loops, and try to determine what I2 is. So flowing out of the 12 volt source, obviously, is minus 12, which is looking at the 12 volts coming out of the source, minus 12 volts, right? Plus R1 times R1, which is 1 ohm, times what? That is 1 ohm resistor multiplied by I2, correct? Since I2 is the current on that side, plus R2, which is 2 ohm resistor, right? Multiplied by the current I2, which is what we're looking for too, right? The current through that resistor, right? And closing the loop is going to be adding that to plus what? Plus R3, which is 3 ohms, multiplied by what? But if you realize the current I2 here, but guess what? There is minus I1, right? Minus I1, which is minus 2 amps, right? Since this is opposing the flow of the source, it would have been minus I1 only, right? But this is I1 prime, since guess what? It is opposing the source flow, right? So that becomes minus 2, which is a 2 amps flowing in that direction here. So and the direction is opposite to that at the clockwise clockwise flows that we're taking as positive. So that's going to end up be equal to what? Closing off that loop. For this loop, I2 loop, is going to be closing off to 0, equal to 0. Now, on the other hand, I1 prime is equal to minus 2 amps, which is opposing the flow, as we said before. I1 is that, but I1 prime is actually minus 2 amps. Now, maybe we don't even need that, because if you look on this, in this loop alone, right, there's only one unknown, right? That one unknown is I2. Let's work it down a little more. Minus 12 plus I2 plus 2I2 plus 3I2 plus 6, right? Because minus minus becomes plus, plus 6 equal to 0. Correct? Now, if we take summation of I2s and shift things around for you to see things easier, you see that I2 plus 2I2 plus 3I2 is actually 6I2, right? And this is minus 12 plus 6, that is minus 6, right? Bring it on the other side, that's equal to 6. So I2 is actually going to be equal to 1 amp. 1 amps. So the correct answer is A. See that clearly? So there's no need for you to analyze the second loop, because what we realize is that taking voltage around this loop, KVL around this loop, we realize that the voltage source times the resistors, all these resistors times the current, given the value of I1 was already given, except we got to know that it's opposing the flow of our clockwise motion. Once we substitute those values in, we realize that there's no need to use the second loop anymore. We don't need to cycle through the second loop, because the second loop have a current source, I should say. So that current source, you substitute that value here and work out for I2 based on the equation, the first equation, taking loops around that loop 1, it works out to be 1 amp. I2 works out to be 1 amp. Let's try another question. Alright, so if we should try, let's try another question, kind of similar but different in its own right. This time, let's do another similar question, then we can convince that we're going to use Thevenin this time and try to find the circuit, solve the circuit that way.